Greetings and blessings to all of you, sisters and associates. I'm happy to be able to share with you today some reflections on one of the social teachings of the Church, on the dignity of work, and some of the challenges that I think this teaching offers us today. In 1981, Pope John Paul wrote an encyclical called On Human Work, and the dominant themes of this encyclical are: all human beings have a right to work in a humane environment to earn a fair wage and social benefits. And also, Jesus, who spent most of his life working at a carpenter's bench, showed us that it is not the work so much as the person who is to be respected. The question that this presents to us today is, where and how do we see this teaching lived out in our congregation? We need only to look at our history, our constitutions, and the lived experience of our sisters and associates in ministry today. Throughout our congregational history, from our foundation in Le Puy to our beginnings in Philadelphia and up until the present moment, the Sisters of St. Joseph have always been with the working class. They established schools, orphanages, and always served where working people were. It's in our history, it's our DNA. The mission section of our Constitution states that we live and work so that all people may be united with God and one another. And, in fidelity to our founder's wish, we live and work lovingly among all persons with a special preference for the poor. And may I say here that when I speak of the poor, I am speaking of the working class poor, the unemployed and the underemployed. How can we, sisters and associates of the 21st century, defend the rights and dignity of people who cannot work and people who are unemployed? There are countless ways in which this is happening, but I'd like to mention one in particular because it is reliving our congregational history. In 1872, the Sisters of St. Joseph established our first mission in New Jersey at St. John's in Newark. St. John's is the oldest Catholic parish in the state of New Jersey. They opened St. John's School there, serving the children of working class people until 1925, when it closed. In 2008, the Sisters of St. Joseph, in the person of Jane McKenna, returned to St. John's, this time not to open a school, but a soup kitchen for homeless women and children. Many of these women once held very responsible positions and now find themselves unemployed, homeless, and with children to care for. Where we began in 1872, we are serving once again. Doesn't this echo the words of our Constitution? That same spirit will make us search for ways to respond creatively to the developing needs of people. I think so. How can we help this to happen in our world today? As we examine today's society, we can't help but notice how the rights of workers have been so severely weakened and diminished. And in addition, the growing number of persons barred from obtaining work because of their status as undocumented immigrants is reaching unprecedented proportions. On a personal note, I've been very blessed over the past 5 years with what I call a golden grace in my life, and that is of ministering to a special group of people from Central and South America. Every Saturday morning, I join a group of volunteers from a local church, and we go to a construction site where these men stand, hoping to obtain a job for the day. Most of them don't speak English, and they live in constant fear of being deported. Each week we bring them food, and then stand on the street with them to teach them basic skills in English. We don't know how much English they're learning, but we do hope that our presence helps them in their struggle to find work. This ministry has been one of the greatest graces of my life. Not all of us can work directly in support of the rights of workers, but we can all do something. Father James Martin, the author of The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything, writes what he sees as a clear challenge for all Christians today when he says, "Get to know the poor." he suggests that we find opportunities to volunteer in places of service to the poor so we can see firsthand how they live. You will get to know them, he says, not as the poor, but as individuals with their own stories. If you can't volunteer to serve directly, can you make one decision, one commitment on behalf of working class people? Perhaps change the way we think about it? At our October assembly, Connie Fitzgerald laid down that same challenge when she said, "Our time is now. Can you open your heart to be challenged by the call of the poor? Will you allow Jesus to take you to those places of your heart where you will be moved to action on behalf of the poor?" Pope John Paul called the Church of 1981 to protect and defend the rights of workers. We, 30 years later, are called to do the same. As sisters and associates, we have no choice but to respond. What will be our response? In the first of this series, sponsored by the Justice Commission, Ann Myers challenged us to take up the call to justice. She dared us to embrace this call. In that same spirit, I dare us, I double dare us to do the same. Do we dare to say yes? The answer lies within each of us. Thank you. Let us continue to take up our call.